From 1966 until 2003, something magical happened in Portsmouth every November and December. For thousands of late baby boomers and Generation Xers across Hampton Roads, it was as much a part of their holiday traditions while growing up as Santa Claus, Christmas trees, or carols. For 37 years, visits to Coleman's Nursery's Winter Wonderland created memories that would last a lifetime. Join us as we spend the next half hour remembering Coleman's Winter Wonderland. Hi, I'm Rob Lauer. Welcome to Remembering Coleman's Winter Wonderland. On a Sunday afternoon in December 1966, my parents drove my brothers and me out to the still mostly rural Churchland area to visit Coleman's Nursery. Now, going to a nursery and waiting around for what seemed like hours while grown-ups shopped for plants wasn't something we kids enjoyed. But our parents assured us that we'd only be staying for a few minutes, that there was something new at Coleman's, something Christmassy, that they thought we'd enjoy seeing. When we got there, Coleman's looked much as it always did. But as we approached the gift shop, we saw that one of the front windows was decked out for the holidays. And as we got closer to the window and looked in, we saw a small bed with an animated Santa doll lying in it fast asleep, the quilt on the bed rising up and down as he snored away. And in front of the bed was a sign, "Don't wake until December 24th. We kids stood there with our faces pressed against the glass, fascinated by this sleeping Santa. And for the first time ever, it was our parents telling us that we really needed to get going. For the next few weeks, it seemed that all the kids at school were talking about was a sleeping Santa at Coleman's Nursery. That one display was the beginning of Coleman's Winter Wonderland. Within just a couple of years, all of the buildings that made up Coleman's Nursery were fully decorated for the holiday, with literally hundreds of animated holiday figures on display in every window, corner, nook, and cranny. A trip to Coleman's Nursery in December became like a trip to a holiday-themed Disneyland. Coleman's Nursery was opened in 1943, out in the wilds of Churchland's truck farm country, by John Coleman, a gentleman who, with his well-groomed mustache, actually looked a little bit like Walt Disney. In 1954, Junie Lancaster and his wife Millie joined forces with Mr. Coleman. And it was the Lancasters who, in the 1960s, after visiting New York City during the holiday season and enjoying the animated holiday figures in store windows along Fifth Avenue, decided to bring a little of that New York City Christmas magic to Coleman's.
I'm Millie Lancaster. I married Junie Lancaster, and I knew him all my life. I'm 94 years old. We were married at the age of 23. We'd go to Mr. Coleman and buy shrubs and flowers. We had a beautiful yard and a home. Mr. Coleman lived in Florida. He was raised and born there, married, had a nice wife, no children. He was a very, very wealthy man, only went 3 years to school, first grade, second grade, third grade. But he was a wealthy man. Along came the boom, and he lost all he owned. He came to Portsmouth, and when he came to Portsmouth, he sold washing machines and Maytags. And then he thought, I may start a nursery and name it Coleman Nursery on High and Cedar Lane. Well, we used to buy shrubs from him, and with no children, he took a liking to my husband. He called him Duke, and my husband called him Chief. So we worked with Mr. Coleman, and I did the bookkeeping. And then Mr. Coleman got sick, passed away, and left all of that to my husband. In the winter, we weren't busy. And my husband said, Millie, I have a good idea. We're not busy in the wintertime, and I think I'd like to go to New York where they make animated figures. We took time off, went to New York, and we stayed there and picked them out, brought them back, and employees put it all together. And he said, I want to name it Winter Wonderland. So we put the animated figures together, and then we never charged, and people came all over the world to see it. We had a gift shop, candy shop, garden shop, a nursery, candle shop, candy shop, very big. My husband and I named the garden the Coleman Garden. In the Coleman Garden, we had a manger scene, animated, and people would come in night and day. It was all lighted. People would come in and just wander all over the building. And it was a good thing, and it brought people to Portsmouth to see it all. And that was a good thing too. I remember children with buses would come in, and my husband would say, "Children, thank you for coming. You follow me and I'll lead you to see Winter Wonderland." And he loved the smiles of those children's faces, and he was so happy. That was his big desire. And that's how we were able to start Winter Wonderland. And then Dabney Morgan and Floyd Twyford later bought it from us. And they ran it and had Winter Wonderland. And then, of course, after that, they ran it, and then later they sold it, and now it's downtown on Court and High Street. Downtown Portsmouth, lighted up at Christmas, monumental, the Nativity, Children's Museum. People from all over the world come to downtown and enjoy the Winter Wonderland and the trains and the toys. I could just go on and on saying how happy it all happened. It did my life happy too.
By the 1970s, Coleman's Winter Wonderland was a Hampton Roads holiday phenomenon. Each year, Winter Wonderland's grand opening was on Thanksgiving, and it stayed open until New Year's. I wasn't the only person who started ditching the televised Thanksgiving Day parades early so that I could be among the first to see what was new among the holiday displays at Winter Wonderland that year. And you didn't visit Coleman's only once during the holiday season. You might go there every Friday night or Sunday afternoon throughout December.
So I'm Lisa McCoy McCrite, and I am a Portsmouth girl, so Coleman's Nursery was a very integral part to the holiday season for our families.
I worked with a few young ladies, well, ladies in my age bracket, who had never been to Coleman's Nursery. And as a kid, between 9 and 12 years of age, I recall going there with my stepmom. Hello, I'm Doris Copeland. I've been a resident of Portsmouth, Virginia my entire life, which would be 60 years. I'm not ashamed.
So I'm Kathy McCoy Collier, and my earliest memory of Coleman's is probably 5th grade. We had moved into Hatton Point when I was in 4th grade, and so we had discovered it that year.
I'm Natalie Kent, and I grew up in Portsmouth, and we would go to Coleman's Nursery annually every Thanksgiving after the big meal.
My name is Mark Ken, and I moved with my parents to Portsmouth from Alabama in '79. My first Thanksgiving here, I was dating my wife Natalie, and she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were dating, and I went over to her parents for lunch. And after lunch, everybody piled in the car and we're heading to Coleman's. And I knew Coleman's because it was right in the heart of Churchland. I passed it many times, but I didn't go to Nursery, so I didn't ever have any experience there. And they said, "We're going over there to the Winter Wonderland." I'm like, "What? What is that?"
It was a tradition. After Thanksgiving dinner, we went there.
So we go, and it was interesting.
I'm pretty sure that my husband did not want to be drugged to Coleman's the first time that we went to Christmas Wonderland.
There were a lot of all kind of little Christmas animated things, and they had different stores set up where you could go in and buy candy, which I loved the candy shop that they had there, but it was a strange thing for me my first time.
What I do remember is everything being animated, you know, the motion to everything, not the trees. The trees were so well lit, and the bright lights, the colored lights, but everything being animated.
I think probably one of the first memories that I had, I was probably 6 or 7, and at the time my grandfather was from Boston, and he came down one Christmas season, and we lived close enough that we could walk. We walked up to Coleman's Nursery with him at Thanksgiving, and he loved it. Well, the very next morning I woke up and he said, "You know what, I will give you a quarter if you walk back up to that place with me again." Every day he would ask who wanted to walk up to Coleman's with him, and he said that he'd pay us a quarter if we'd walk up there. So every day during that visit, we walked up to Coleman's Nursery with him. He was probably here for about 4 or 5 days, and I probably made a good $2 because every time he wanted to go, he gave me a quarter. And I think that's where our love of Coleman's Nursery really started.
The feel of things at Coleman's Nursery was so warm. That is just the thought that comes to my mind when I think about the way that it felt, because it could be a cold winter night, but as soon as you walked in there, you felt warm. And I don't know whether it was the lighting that was there or just the scenery itself that just made you feel like you were in a fantasy land. Oh, Winter Wonderland.
And when we got to Coleman's Nursery and you saw all of these things lit up and with animation, man, as a kid, that was just spectacular.
It was just so festive. I mean, everything about it was just Christmas.
It had a warm feeling to it, and throughout the entire layout, when you were in there, it was just very warm and inviting.
You knew Christmas started when Coleman's was set up and ready. You would get there, there was always music playing, there was popcorn, it just smelled like Christmas, it sounded like Christmas.
It was very much a community event. You saw everybody. You saw anywhere from friends to families to church members. It was fun. It was a great place. It was more than just a one-time event. You went several times during the holidays.
You would walk around looking at all the different things. I especially liked the ones where it had all the old-timey set rooms with the ladies in the long dresses, and there was a time when I thought that would have been a fun time to live. Not so much now.
The reindeer, they had a reindeer exhibit.
I think the favorite one, the display that I had, was the one of Santa in the bed sleeping. He would be sleeping until December 24th. We would always want to, my sister and I, we were really close in age, we would always look for that sleeping Santa, and we would go and just stand and just watch him sleeping.
I think I was most impressed with the train exhibit, because I don't know if I had ever seen an electric train. Maybe I did, but to see all of those trains there running, that was really impressive to a kid, well, to me.
Well, of course, as a kid, my favorite section was the candy store. I mean, they just had the coolest candies, from, rock candy that you didn't see anywhere except for at Coleman's, to, Christmas items that were made out of jellies and things like that. It was just fun. The Christmas store was, and we always had to do that last. So it was, you had to walk around, and then finally you could run down the little cobblestones to the Christmas candy store.
A lot of the stuff that they sold there, you could never find it anywhere else, and it was not usually around except at Christmas time at Coleman's.
At the time, it was the only place you could buy candy sticks, like 10 for $1 candy sticks. That was a big deal.
But I think too, I liked the center display when you were walking up, and there was the train station that they had a long time ago across the street, and then there was just that center. It was a little tiny display, but it was just that's where your excitement started to grow, as you then saw that, and then you knew what was coming your way.
I would really have to say that my favorite display would have been the nativity scene.
Probably my favorite display was, I love the nativity scene that they had out back.
Oh, the fabulous nativity out back with the ornate costumes and baby Jesus sleeping.
The other thing that I think was wonderful about Coleman's Nursery, and what Coleman's Nursery was, not only did you hear Christmas and you could smell Christmas and you just felt Christmas when you were walking through there, it didn't matter what kind of chaos was going on. If you walked outside to the manger scene, it was always quiet.
There was something about the way that you walked out into that courtyard atmosphere that was quiet, it was serene, just a breathtaking experience, even as a child.
And I just remember, my mom and dad saying to us as a kids, now when we go out here, you have to be quiet.
They had such beautiful music playing in the background, and the volume of it, the only way I could describe it would be perfect, because it allowed you to concentrate on the nativity scene, but also hear the choir music singing in the background, and really help you remember what Christmas was all about.
Especially those years that it was cold outside, it just made, kind of imagining what that nativity scene was really like back in the day. Another thing I loved was I called them the crazy clowns.
The clowns, the big clowns that came out of the box.
It was like, why the clowns? What is...
My sister hates clowns. She's terribly, deathly afraid of clowns.
The 14-foot blowing up clown had to be the center of every nightmare of Portsmouth kids growing up.
They were kind of, yeah, they were a little weird.
They always scared other little kids, but I thought it was hilarious.
I have never had problems with clowns.
I think that is the most disturbing display with the clowns. I am so not a clown person to this day. But I remember, walking through there and just absolutely running out of there screaming like, oh my gosh, because that one just kind of puffed up and got bigger and bigger.
They were so big, and they would come out and they would just kind of hang, and then they would go back in.
They seemed a little evil to me, and they were kind of fun to see at Christmas time. Another thing I really remember was they always had a roaring fireplace in the Coleman room, and they would have cider and stuff in there, and that was just kind of a neat gathering place.
The Coleman room was really just a big reception hall, but you could get hot cider in there. I totally remember that. You could get hot cider, and it was just a place to gather. It was also warm. When it would get cold, and the majority of Coleman's Nursery was not heated. I mean, it was a nursery, for goodness sakes, and it was outside a lot of it, but it was always warm in there. There was a fireplace in there. It was always warm in there. So you would go in there and you'd get your cup of cider, and you could get warm real quick. But a lot of organizations did have meetings or banquets or annual little get-togethers in the Coleman room.
It was a beautiful room, and I will say that that's also where we decided, my husband and I decided to have our reception after our wedding rehearsal. After wedding rehearsal dinner, and I'd forgotten all about that, to be honest with you.
When I was in high school, it was a very big deal that if you were going to go to Coleman's, you had a date.
It was very important to get that date, while you were in high school to Coleman's during, the Christmas season. So you definitely wanted to be checked out up there.
It was kind of cold, so it gave you a good reason to hold hands or to snuggle up against him, or you just had to have a date for Coleman's. It was just one of those things that was all about the season. And it had to have been New Year's Eve 1983. I was invited to a New Year's Eve party, and I was a junior in high school. I wasn't allowed to drive because it was New Year's Eve. So my parents were driving me to a friend's house to a New Year's Eve party, and we came up Cedar and were parked at the stoplight, and when we looked over, my dad said, "Oh, there's a fire," and Mom and I both looked, and Coleman's was on fire. The fire station, which was right beside Coleman's Nursery, had not been called yet. It had not been dispatched yet. They were not even out of the gate yet. And so my dad, being the kind of person that he is, put the car in park, ran out in the middle of High Street and started directing traffic. And then about that time, the fire station got wind of it, or got a call. Yeah, and the sirens came, and then as soon as the fire trucks and the police cars got there, we left and they took over. But that was always the big thing, is that we got there before the fire station did, and the fire station's right next door.
I can remember that my mom called the minister because our minister lived right behind Coleman's Nursery. My mom called the minister's wife and was talking to her, asking her what all the sirens were for, and she looked out the back window of their house, the parsonage, and saw the flames coming up, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I think Coleman's Nursery's on fire."
And everybody was wondering, how bad was the damage? What was salvaged, what was saved? And I got to admit, at that time, it had become such a tradition for our family. I worried about it too, because my kids, they were getting to the age now where they knew what we were doing and they were excited about going, and I was thinking, man, what's going to happen when they're not able to go anymore?
We were determined to go back as soon as they opened up and go view it, and it was wonderful the way that they had recreated it.
And I remember when Coleman's ultimately closed down and it died, and I had no idea what was going to happen to the stuff.
We almost wanted to cry when we knew that Coleman's wasn't going to be there anymore, because, we're talking decades, of going and traveling and seeing all of this stuff there.
Once my brothers, we were all grown up, and my brothers had children, and we would get back together for our family Christmas. We would make it a tradition, if the family Christmas was in the Tidewater area, we would make it a family tradition to take the nieces and nephews, their children, over there to Coleman's Nursery. And on the last year that they were open, We definitely all piled in the cars. In fact, we even made Christmas at my house in Chesapeake that year so that we could go to Coleman's Nursery and see their display one last time before they closed up.
I do think the last season they were open, we went several times. And we got an ornament. We have an ornament for our Christmas tree that we put up every year, and we have certain ornaments that the boys know that I hang certain ornaments, and I get to hang the Coleman's ornament every year.
I hang this on my Christmas tree every year now, and it says right at the bottom, Coleman's Nursery. So, and it just brings back some wonderful memories whenever I pull that out of the box and hang it on the Christmas tree.
So my dad is Luke McCoy, and my dad absolutely loves the city of Portsmouth. Everything that it is, everything that it has to offer. And so Coleman's was just that added piece of Portsmouth that he loved. And my dad always would find whatever excuse to go up to Coleman's during the Christmas season too. And so I think that and knowing that we lived just in, a neighborhood right down the street, so not only did we get to go, but we would always walk up as a family, which made it special.
In the late summer of 2003, when Floyd Twyford and Dabney Morgan and Hezzy called me and said they'd like to sit down and talk to me about the Coleman collection. And certainly it was something that we wanted to make happen, but I guess the most important part is, how do you make something like that happen without the taxpayers paying the burden or taking the burden of that expense?
Mr. McCoy came to the Portsmouth Museums Foundation in our meeting in November of 2003 and confronted us to say, you are the organization that can fundraise, that can purchase this, and that can keep it in Portsmouth. And that is exactly what we want to do. There were a number of groups across the country that were very interested in the collection.
There were two cities in upstate New York that came down, looked at it, and wanted to purchase.
The foundation members mulled over it for a short time, and I say short, and we said, yes, we're the ones to do it. We can put it in a museum. At that point, we didn't know what museum, but we could put it in a museum and move forward and bring the collection back. So in January of 2004, the papers were signed between the Coleman Group at that time, and it became ours.
I guess as I look back, almost 40 years now, some of the fondest memories that I had prior to coming to work for the city of Portsmouth was taking my children to Coleman's Nursery, certainly at Christmas time, and visiting what they called Winter Wonderland. And the nicest part of my career was, who would have ever thought that a person that visited Coleman's Nursery as a young man that would later become the city manager and play a major part of helping our city council and helping our museum foundation to acquire one of the most notable icons in the state of Virginia.
And in 2004, the holidays of 2004, we opened with a grand opening under tents, and everybody was invited, and thus we kicked off the new Winter Wonderland.
I love that that's part of my dad's legacy, I think, to the city, is making sure that part of our city is kept alive. I think it's a great thing that the small parts of Coleman that could be reproduced were reproduced and kept in Portsmouth. And I do think that that's an important thing for future generations to be able to have a little taste of it.
I'm LaVorris Pace, Director of Marketing and Communications with the City of Portsmouth, and our department is really responsible for promotions and advertising of Winter Wonderland and the Coleman Collection. So, having been here now almost 8 years, of course, we do the promotional advertising for it every year. And I think the irony of the situation is that as a child, being born and raised in Smithfield, for many of you who know, there was not much in Smithfield in the 60s and 70s. But part of our field trips, we would come from Smithfield to the Coleman Collection, to Coleman's Nursery, to view the Coleman Collection. Of course, it was astonishing. I mean, at that time, those animated characters were just amazing. And my favorite exhibit was the Sleeping Santa. And of course, just seeing him sleeping, you'd be hitting on the window trying to wake him up. But the irony of the situation for me is that we came from Smithfield to view that, and it was such a wonderful thing at the holidays, never knowing that some 25, 30 years later that I would be responsible for promotions and marketing and making sure that we get people to come here to see that old nostalgic tradition.
The nativity scene was a major part of the Coleman collection, and as many that grew up here know the nativity scene kind of used to sit on Cedar Lane, and everybody enjoyed going to see it. When the foundation purchased the collection and it was going to go on city property, it was a decision was made by a number of parties that the nativity scene would not be a part of the collection. So we went out and in fundraising mode once again, because we were in the middle of fundraising for the new Children's Museum, the Portsmouth Museum's Foundation raised all the money to purchase the collection, including the nativity scene from Coleman, Inc. And we were very fortunate that Monumental Methodist Church on Dinwiddie Street was very interested in purchasing it and putting it on their property during the holidays. And it is now in their chapel area, and we encourage all of our visitation to Winter Wonderland to walk 1 block over to Dinwiddie Street and see the nativity scene. Monumental did a wonderful job of rebuilding it, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a stunning moment to walk in and see that nativity scene.
I'm glad that the city is able to, have a place that future generations can come and see some of the Coleman's pieces.
So something that I'm hoping that my kids, that they'll probably bring them down and walk them through and say, yeah, your granddad took me to Coleman's when I was a little kid.
It's good to see something that one generation has enjoyed, and then it's passed right down to the next generation, and you're actually seeing yourself through them now. And I just think that's so amazing to be able to see something like that passed down from generation to generation.
This room is just one of several places where throughout the year, the Portsmouth Museum stores the hundreds of animated figures, scenic pieces, props, lights, and other decorations that make up the Coleman Winter Wonderland collection. The museum's Winter Wonderland display opens to the public during Thanksgiving weekend every year, introducing new generations to this magical Hampton Roads holiday tradition. But the monumental job of bringing these pieces out of storage and setting them up in and around the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center begins weeks earlier, in mid-October, and only then after months and months of creative work and planning. The job of all that planning and creativity falls on a group of talented men and women who make up the museum's exhibits division.
And my name is Timothy Machowski. I'm the exhibit supervisor for the Portsmouth Museums. And I've only been in my position since April, but I've been here for like the last 16 or so years. And I've been doing Winter Wonderland for 10 years.
I'm Skip Novak. I'm the exhibit technician in charge of the Lancaster Antique Train and Toy Collection here at the Children's Museum of Virginia. I've been working with the Winter Wonderland Coleman's Nursery collection for the past 10 years. I helped strike it at Coleman's Nursery and put it into storage when the museum's foundation got a hold of it, when they bought it outright, and I've been working with it ever since.
My name is Jenny Heath. I am a first-year exhibit technician. I've actually only been on job for a few months. This is my first time setting up Winter Wonderland.
In 1987, the night I met my wife, it was Christmas time, it was December 7th, and I was talking to her and I said, the thing about being a sailor in this area was there's nothing to do for us. We don't experience any of the local culture. So she said, well, come on. We hopped in the car. She turned on some Christmas tunes and drove me from Military Circle Mall out to Coleman's Nursery, and that was the first time I experienced Winter Wonderland. Little did I know, 3.5 years later, I would be marrying her. So yeah, it's kind of a weird circle that I started off going on a date with this woman, our first date, to this Winter Wonderland, and now I'm actually, working with the figures almost every day of my life. And it just seems that that was one fateful night that set the course for my entire lifetime, and it all revolves around Winter Wonderland.
We start putting it up the first week of October down at the Children's Museum is when we have a scene down there. So we start that first week of October, and then it's pretty much as soon as about mid-October we start. This year we're starting on the first floor first, and it should take us about a week, and then we will move upstairs as soon as that show finishes and we can get into the space. So that'll be probably end of this week, which is late October, into end of October we'll start upstairs.
My first thoughts was, oh, it's kind of cool. I get to help set up this huge Winter Wonderland thing. And then I start thinking about all the Christmas trees and the snow and all the figures, and it's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it.
Definitely the biggest thing we do all year, mainly because it takes 6 weeks to set up. Then the exhibit runs for a month, and then it takes another 4 weeks to take it all down. So it's a good, it's a quarter of the year where we're just Winter Wonderland. And this year, because it is the 10th anniversary, we started basically in March refurbishing sets and working on figures and laying out the theme of what we wanted to do. So this has been an all-year project this year anyway.
I'm mainly in charge of the trains and getting the train set up in whatever scene has trains. Also, I'm pretty much in charge of fixing the figures, making sure the animatronics are always working, replacing motors, refabricating some of the internal mechanisms that wear out or break over time and use.
It's not your typical exhibit where it's take it out of the box, hang it on the wall. This is more of there's a lot of thought that goes into, okay, what do we want to do? Do we want to do an outdoor scene? Do we want to use the woodland creatures this year? Do we just want to do a straight up Santa scene? How are we going to display the elves? You sort of sit down, you have the space in mind, and then it's sort of, all right, going through what we have figure-wise, how do we want to change it, do the sleigh differently, we want to put this there this year and take that out. It is a timely process of sort of processing, all right, we have all this stuff, but what's the best way to set it up? So it is different from a typical, say, an out-of-the-box exhibit or a traveling exhibit where you only have so much stuff and you know what your space is, and there is some tweaking with those shows, but this is it is online with a stage show where you're trying to get the most out of what you got and make it look good.
Right after we struck last year's Winter Wonderland back in January, in February I had figures in my office and I started working on them, and it has been just a constant upkeep of these, getting, I don't know, over a dozen, 2 dozen of them working again for this year.
We had tagged at the end of last year stuff that wasn't working, and he went through, we probably fixed 20 figures at least, starting this summer. And since plugging stuff in this year, we found some of that stuff we haven't used in 6 years isn't quite up to snuff. So I don't know if we're gonna have time to get everything fixed into this year, but it's definitely on the list for when we shut down next year.
I'm looking forward to setting up the snow babies. We got to refinish the Ferris wheel for them this year, so that's all freshly painted and redone.
This year we're reincorporating some scenes that were designed by Bob Getty 10 years ago, and we're using those. We're also keeping some of the newer and fresher scenes that Pat Jensen helped design and Tim helped design, and some of the things that I've helped design over the years. And so we're just, it's a mix of the art of the old and the new, and we also, during the design phase, we're also able to use our artistic talents to make everything blend well and have a nice smooth flow for people's eyes and ears as they go through.
It is a bit of a challenge. I'm used to working on the computer. This is, you have to make sure you decorate the trees nicely, lay out everything, hide all the wires. That takes a bit of time and figuring out how to set stuff up. And then there's also going to be a few graphics when you exit that I'm working on to help make it more Christmassy on the outside.
This year's actually gone a lot quicker. In less than 2 weeks, we've almost got 3 rooms done. We've got Sleeping Santa room done, the workshop done. We're working in Penguins right now. By the end of this week, we should be upstairs. It requires a lot of man hours We have 5 people in our department, and we're working anywhere between 32 and 40 hours a week here with each one of us. It's about a 5-week process total from start to finish for setup.
There's a sense of satisfaction on if we finish before the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, that's a good plus.
There's an extreme sense of satisfaction and joy. I really do enjoy seeing the little ones run around and hear the little squeals of delight that they have when they see the trains or one of the figures move, or they discover something that they didn't see last year. The adults I really enjoy talking to, hearing their stories about when they were a kid out at Coleman's Nursery, and what that figure meant to them and what Winter Wonderland really meant to them.
I'm anticipating a lot of people looking at it like, oh, that's different, that's new, oh, I remember this one, and just trying to pick out the new stuff that they will enjoy for years to come, and also the classics that they've enjoyed in the past.
Creating new holiday memories for years to come from the classics of the past, that's what the Coleman's Winter Wonderland display at the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center is all about. This holiday season, we invite you to come see it and to start making your own special memories. I'm Rob Lauer. For everyone at the Portsmouth Museums, may you and your family have the happiest of holidays.